Hello friends, it is March, the sun is out, it's starting to slowly get warmer, and so I'm getting a little bit happier, which is always a good sign. I do not do well in the cold. I am very much a sunshine person. I'm going to do another wrap-up video today. I'm going to talk about all the books that I read in February. This is the second wrap-up video I'm filming this year already, which is always a very good sign, because it means I do actually want to sit down and film videos, which is brilliant. We're just going to get straight in. Now, the first book I'm going to talk about I read in January and completely forgot to include it in my wrap up. So I don't know why, I just did. And then I saw it and I was like, I read that this month and didn't talk about it. And I don't know why. So, Anna O. This is a proof that I was kindly sent to read and review. This is a thriller about someone who commits murder, but when she's sleepwalking and she stays asleep after the murder for years later, and it's about them trying to wake her up. Can she be convicted for these murders? Is she actually guilty? Was she conscious of what she was doing even though she was asleep? And I thought it was a really interesting concept. I found this a really quick and easy thriller to get through. It had really short chapters, which is always a bonus. I found it really interesting, intriguing. It was quite engaging. The only thing is, it is quite long. So the book is out now, but it is still quite chunky, and I just think there was a lot of content that wasn't needed. You kind of got to the conclusion of the murders and then the story just carried on, and I felt like that added extra wasn't really needed. So the last book I read in January was this one. I gave it a 3.5 stars. It was alright, you know. I love thrillers, but I hate reading them because they always disappoint me. At the start, this really sucked me in and I was really enjoying it, and then the more I read, the more I just got bored. Moving on to actually what I did read in February. This month I managed to read 7 books, which is insane because I don't think I've read 7 books in a month in years. So really happy with that. The first book I read was a poetry collection. I read the e-arc of this, which was sent to me very kindly to read and share my thoughts on, and that is The Shadow of My Ancestral Tree. This is a really personal poetry collection. It really feels like this author has just bared her heart out onto the pages for us to all read. It's really honest, it's really raw, it's full of emotion. It's just a really moving, hauntingly beautiful poetry collection. I think especially for children whose parents are immigrants, there's a lot there that they can relate to. And yeah, it was just a really quick and easy poetry collection for me to fly through. Whilst the content wasn't easy, the poems are short and snappy, so I was flying through this book in no time, and I found it really emotional. But I really enjoyed reading it, and I thought it was a really creative way to get all your emotions out there on paper, and I think it's really brave of the author. It's almost like sharing your heart with someone. So yeah, that was the first book I read and I really enjoyed that. Next up, I read the book Out of the Blue. I picked this up at Yelp 2 years ago because I got told it was basically an LGBTQ version of The Little Mermaid, and I love The Little Mermaid, so I was like, oh yeah, sounds great. And I clearly wasn't the target audience, which again is fine, but I just think also the writing style was a bit messy because it was on the younger side of YA, but then they'd have conversations and be doing things that are clearly for older readers, so it was a bit of a mixed bag. And I just found all of the characters really unlikable. They were all just really like selfish and angry and very two-dimensional, and normally I can pin it down to, well, they're teenagers, you know, that's what teenagers are like, it's very realistic, but for everyone to be so unlikable to read about. So Out of the Blue, I went in there with really high hopes, and I'm really sad that I was disappointed by it, but not every book can be for me. Next is a book which is now out. I read the ARC, which I got at Yelp, and that book is Where Sleeping Girls Lie. This is the lovely finished copy with the nice red sprayed edges. This is a dark academia thriller, and it's about someone who starts at a new school and her roommate goes missing the day after she starts. And the school kind of write it off as, oh yeah, she's just left school, she's gone to live with her family now instead. But the main character and the roommate's best friend are like, no, there's something different going on, that is definitely not it. So it's about the pair of them trying to find out what's happened to the roommate, and it's their little investigation to try and uncover the truth. There's a sapphic storyline as well within the plot, and there's some found family, and it's kind of got like Mean Girls vibes, but it's a bit darker, and I thought this book was really good. I really enjoyed it. I flew through it in no time. Again, there were short chapters, which I love, and I think the book tackles a really real and dark theme people go through daily in a way that's really unique and clever, and it's full of twists and turns, and it's just a really fantastic dark academia thriller. I really enjoyed this one. I love this author. I read Ace of Spades and thought it was a brilliant book, and this one is equally as brilliant. So yeah, really enjoyed this book this month. Next is a book that I read with my friend Leanne again, and this is In Memoriam. This book had been on my shelf for ages and I really wanted to read it. So when me and Leanne decided to read it together, I was so happy with that choice. This book is about two men. I say men, they're 17, so they're still kids really, who sign up to go and fight in the First World War. And there is a romantic undertone with these two. They're kind of not quite together, but more than friends when they first sign up, and it's basically their relationship throughout that period of World War One. This book was heartbreaking. Not even one bit of it was. Consistently, I would just be in tears throughout this book, and I have underlined so much of the book in pencil. I think when the paperback is out, I'm going to have to go back and annotate it, because I don't know how well you can see that. So much of the book I've underlined. It is so beautifully written. It has this really poetic, gorgeous writing style, but it's also so heartbreaking. Like, these two teenage boys are reading the newspaper and seeing how many people they know are dead, and the list is just getting longer and longer and longer, and the horrors of the war is written in this in a way that's so respectful and sensitive, yet doesn't shy away from just how horrific it was. It is not an easy read, but I think it's a crucial read. It's so heartbreaking. It is fantastically written. It's a really fast-paced read. I flew through it in like 4 days, I think. And there's a lot of letters in there as well, which are really emotional to read, because it's obviously letters from the front to the families of those that have died, saying, your son was killed in action, but he died for his country, which is the best way to go. And of course, people genuinely believe that. They've lost their sons and husbands, but at the same time they're like, well, he died for his country, and how could I not be proud of that? So it's really full of the complexities of the human heart. It's full of emotion. It is just an absolutely incredible read. This is already a contender for one of my top books of 2024. This is my book of the video. The last video, my book of the video, was A Tempest of Tea. This is the book of this video for February, In Memoriam. Absolutely incredible. Cannot stop thinking about it. After In Memoriam, I read a book that was slightly less heavy. That is House of Dreams. It's a book that I was on a book tour for, so I was reading it and sharing my thoughts as I read, and then I shared my review of it at the end. I don't think this book was really for me. I signed up for it originally because it's a book about a man who buys a house which was previously owned by Catherine Parr, and basically it's a historical fiction about how he learns a lot about the history of the house, the history of the people who lived there, who built it, who worked there, about Catherine Parr herself and the people in her life, and how he learned from the house and how the house also helped him to heal. So it did sound really interesting. I did just find though that I really only enjoyed the historical fiction elements of it. So I really loved learning about the historical period of the house, how it was built, about the context of history at the time, going through the ages. I really loved those historical elements, but the actual main plot about the man himself in the present day, I just didn't really find engaging enough for me to get interested in. There's no real reason why not, it just wasn't for me. So I did enjoy reading it, and I did find it a really interesting read, but it was just one of those books that when I finished it I was like, yeah, okay, next book anyway. So yes, that was that book, House of Dreams. I was very grateful to be on the tour though, and it was really fun getting to share my thoughts as I read and getting to chat to other people who were also reading the book at the same time. Following House of Dreams, I then read The Jungle. This is a book, again, I bought years ago. It's from a backlist. I decided to finally get around to reading it. This is a really little book, so I flew through it in about 3 days, and it is about the refugee camp that was in Calais, nicknamed The Jungle. I don't know how to talk about this book. It's really hard to talk about because it's a middle grade, but I think at the same time it's a really hard topic to make accessible for middle grade readers. I think The Boy at the Back of the Classroom, Boy at the Back of the Classroom, Back of the Class, I think it's Boy at the Back of the Class. That is a middle grade book also about refugees, and I think that handled the topic really well, really respectfully, in a way full of like emotion and heart. It did make the topic of refugees accessible for kids. This, I think, bordered more onto the YA side, so it was still a really good book, but being sold as a middle grade I think was not the best decision. I think it's definitely a YA book because it goes into the struggles of living in the camp, what led them there. It goes into the risks people are willing to make to try and get to somewhere safe, like to the UK, the journeys they take. It goes into the kind of gang culture that develops in the camp, and it's really quite harrowing to read. I do think it was a really good book, and it was a really interesting insight. It's basically a peek into what the life in the camp is like for a few months. So it is really heavy, really well written. It's a really hard book to share my feelings on. It's really real and honest, and I think these are the kind of stories that need to be told. Books like this can educate people on the reality. So yeah, this was the next book I read. Really tricky to talk about, but I'm glad I read it. And then the last book I read this month, I cannot believe I'm about to talk about this on my channel, is A Call of Mist and Fury by Sarah J. Maas. I can't believe I'm about to talk about this on this channel. It's ridiculous. So I read A Court of Thorns and Roses way back when I was like 13. Definitely shouldn't have read it at 13, but I did. And I remember loving it. And then I remember reading this one straight after, getting bored about that much into it. So I just gave up. And it's just sat on my shelf ever since. Because I bought the whole series at 13 thinking I was going to love it. And then just stopped. This has been on my shelf for years. So I saw it sat on my shelf this month and was like, should I just try it again? See if I can actually get through it this time. And I got through it. And I enjoyed it. I think the more I read, the more I enjoyed it, because the start is very, very slow, and then the more I read, the more interesting the book got, and the more interested I got. I think the ending is brilliant. Like the last third, absolutely fantastic, loved it. But I do think there is some red flags for all of the male characters in the book. I'm intrigued though to see how the rest of the series will go. I have the books, I don't need to go and buy them, I own them all, so I might as well read the rest and see how I get on with them. But so far everyone has said the second book is better than the first, and I'm like, is it better than the first? Because the last third is better than the first, but the rest of it, like, there's not really much going on. It's very beautiful writing style though. I love the world building, the way it's also vividly described and it's so colourful and magical, so I can definitely understand the world building point of view. So yes, that is my thoughts on that. Overall though, very happy with that. A good reading month. I'm trying so hard to buy less books and to read my backlist, and this month, out of all of the books I read, none of them were bought new. One of them was sent to me, so I guess that's not a backlist, but the rest were all backlist books. That's always very exciting. And so yeah, that is all the books I read in February. I hope you read a book you enjoyed in February. If not, I hope you find a book that you enjoy soon, and I will see you some point in the near future. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and I'll see you all again soon. Bye.